Moving to the United States was probably the most nerve-wracking and frustrating and stressful experience I've ever had in my life. 4 or 5 months of selling houses, finding a new church, relocating 6,000 miles, moving our family over here, setting up the whole thing. Now, being a good repressed male, I just pushed it down. All that stress, all of the anger, I just swallowed it. And I got more and more irritable as time went by. And I don't know if you've ever seen in cartoons where there's a hose pipe going through the garden and somebody ties a knot in it or something falls on it. And behind the knot, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And we all know what's going to happen. And in the grass, there's always, coincidentally, a rake or something sharp. We know that that hose pipe is going to hit the rake and explode. So sure enough, I get to the United States and I don't have to wait long for my rake experience. We get into our new house, which has been empty for 3 months, and we find that the company that owns it have done none of the jobs that need to be done on it. We don't have any air conditioning, we don't have clean running water, and the list goes on. These are like major issues. So I am furious. I mean, I'm raging. So I decided I'm going to go in and see the manager. I'm going to explain to him that currently he's functioning somewhere around about the chipmunk level of competency. So I have my speech all prepared, I go in, and I'm very rational for the first few minutes. I'm doing really well. I express my disappointment, and we, talk quite rationally. But then he decides to explain why they'd done nothing. And the reason they'd done nothing was they'd actually managed to buy a whole load of new properties, and they couldn't let those out until they'd been fixed. So as we paid our deposit, it was tough luck. This was, in some way meant to calm me down. This was the right moment. I exploded. Now, I didn't hit him, I didn't shout at him. I wanted to do both of those things a lot. But I just roasted him for 10 minutes. I questioned his character, his competence, his integrity. There was paint peeling off the walls. I mean, I just laid into him. Now, what I did was totally inappropriate. Because although my frustration and my anger was appropriate, what they'd done was wrong. Firstly, my desire was actually just to hurt him. I didn't really want resolution at this point. What I wanted him to do, and what I wanted was for him to feel the pain that I felt. I just wanted to hurt him, if I'm being honest. But the other thing is that the pain that he felt, or that he experienced, it wasn't related to the house. It was related to the last 4 or 5 months. He just got it all in one go. He had that kind of outburst moment. So there were consequences. Our relationship was damaged. And also, 3 or 4 weeks later, I had to go back and ask this guy for a favor. I mean, can you imagine how that conversation went? It was the biggest slice of humble pie I've ever eaten. Now, my guess is that everybody here in this room at some point has experienced the negative consequences of anger. If there isn't somebody who managed not to experience it, then please come up and finish this talk. That'd be great. We all have this experience. So how can we handle our anger in a way that is appropriate? How can we be good at being angry? So today I want to look at what the Bible has to say about that. And we're going to see that our anger is a crossroads. It's a point of decision where we can go one of 2 ways. But our anger is also an opportunity to live out the reality of what God has done in our lives. So turn with me to Genesis chapter 4 and verse 3, and we're going to take a look at the story of Cain and Abel. Genesis 4 and verse 3. And we're going to see the classic example of anger that we have in the Bible. So it says this: in the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. But Abel brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. So he brought the best he had. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Now, see, anger is a secondary emotion. We are angry because of something. And in Cain's case, he's angry because God has rejected his sacrifice. Now, we might have completely legitimate and innocent reasons for being angry, but our anger is always as a consequence of something else. But now we're going to see that God steps into this story and he confronts Cain and says, Cain, you're at a crossroad. There are 2 ways in which you can go. So let's look on in verse 6. It says, then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? Option number 1, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? In other words, if you offer the sacrifice you should have done in the first place, this all goes away. Option number 2, But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it. So here's the choice, here's the crossroads that Cain stands at. He can either deal with the cause and that he goes away, or he can dwell in his anger and let it turn to sin. And God says to him, here's the choice, Cain. You can either master it, or you can be mastered by it. You can either rule over it, or you can be ruled by your anger. And we stand with Cain at that same point. When that flush of anger hits us, we have that same choice. Now, as we read on in verse 8, we see that Cain makes the wrong decision. He says, now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go into the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. And so we see the progression from cause to anger to sitting in our anger and ultimately to the consequence of that, which is murder. Now, you might be thinking, I haven't murdered anybody recently, so I don't really have a problem with anger. Well, at least not in the last 6 months. But the reality is that there are many ways in which our anger can express itself inappropriately. That could be from simply just shouting, throwing things, hitting people. Murder is an extreme example, but we can also internalize our anger. We can direct it at ourselves. You know those conversations that you have, you idiot, why did you do that? Or, how could you be so stupid? How could you let them do that to you? It's such a whim. And so we direct the anger internally. Or we can just swallow it. And I think this is the preferred Christian option. Swallow down the anger, become really bitter, and then let it leak out in our relationships and in our churches. So you may not display your anger externally, but you may still be actually a very angry person. So how do we deal with anger in a way that is appropriate? We're going to turn and we're going to look in the book of Ephesians at Paul writing to a church which is struggling with unity. And he's going to present to them anger as an opportunity to be who they are. Anger as an opportunity to live out the reality of what God is doing in their lives. And in the part of the passage immediately preceding where we read, he's going to talk about putting off our old way of living, our old self, and putting on our new way of living. And it's really important we understand this if we're going to understand what Paul is arguing for. So let me illustrate. Again, so we arrived in the United States. It's a time of big adjustments. The biggest adjustment was driving on a different side of the road. Now for the first 2 or 3 weeks you're great because you're so concentrating on not killing your wife and children, which is a big incentive, that you're good. You're just laser focused. But after a while it starts to become normal to drive on a different side of the road. So sure enough, after a few weeks I'm getting relaxed and it's time for my subconscious to kick in. Now this is really bad because my subconscious is used to driving in the United Kingdom. It has 12 years of experience of driving on a different side of the road. So I come to a junction, there's no cars on the road moving, I have no point of reference, I pull out onto the wrong side of the road. And as I do that, 3 lanes of cars come round in the other direction. I will never forget the look on the woman's face who's driving towards me. Now something tells me actually she probably won't forget mine in a hurry either. So I pulled onto the other side of the road, had a minor heart attack and recovered. But you see, my problem was, I'm living in the United States, but I'm living by the habits of the United Kingdom. The reality is, my existence, where am I? I am in this kingdom, the United States, but I'm living by the rules of an old kingdom. And that's exactly what Paul's going to be talking about. Our reality is that we are children of God. We live in His kingdom. But we have these habits from our former way of living. And if we let those persist in this new life, it will have very negative consequences. So that's the background to what we're going to read. So turn with me to Ephesians 4 and verse 25. That's Ephesians 4 and verse 25.